This conference will now be recorded.
Now, in yesterday's session, the last thing that we looked at was that we said that snapshot is good, but you do not have options, or you basically it lacks a lot of things like the restoration, or let's say the scheduling, the retention, and you don't have a proper state to it. So that's where we said, okay, fine. The recovery services vault, using which you can do perform something known as an Azure backup, is a better option, let's say, than a snapshot, because here you get a timely schedule. You can have a schedule using something known as a backup policy. You can set a schedule, you can take those backups, you can store it inside the recovery services vault, and this recovery services vault is something that you cannot go ahead and directly delete it. Again, we've seen how to delete a recovery services vault. We went into the security settings, disable the soft delete, and etc, and then we went ahead and deleted it out. And this gives a great option to go ahead and do a file restoration, or let's say to do your entire virtual machine restoration and etc. But let's say, for example, that this is, let's say, a very big website. Let's say something like an e-commerce website. Okay. Now, I have set a backup policy in such a way that the minimum schedule that I can go for is once in 24 hours. That's the minimum time period. Meaning I can have a backup starting from a daily, a weekly, a monthly, a yearly, and etc. So the daily basically, which gives me a 24-hour frequency, that's the minimum time frame, or that's the minimum time window basically for where I can go, or that's the minimum time window between one backup and the other. So this is how I'm scheduling things out. But now I am saying that, okay, fine, I am a user, or I am, let's say, a business owner who's designing this virtual machine instance for a very large e-commerce website. So I'll say e-commerce website. So it's a very large e-commerce website, and this virtual machine is actually writing a lot of data in every given minute. Okay, in every given minute, this virtual machine is updating the disk. You have a lot of data basically that is getting into it. And the requirement here is that yes, backup is a great service, but I'll have to wait for 24 hours between one backup and the other. Now, what if, let's say, I take a backup today? After 18 hours, my machine is crashed. Now, I am telling that per every minute, I'm writing so much amount of data. And imagine, let's say, about 18 hours of basically, work time, and I lose, and I lose all that data. Meaning, I only have a backup that I've taken in morning today, but by the evening, my machine crashed. Now, I don't know what to do, because if I go for a backup, I lose any which ways, like, all the data basically that I've taken till this point, which again is a heavy loss for me, right? Because as an e-commerce website, I would like to store all my customer data and etc. Like to secure them and etc. Do all that stuff. That is one issue with the backup service, is that the minimum time frame out here is a 24-hour window. At least I'll have to wait for 24-hour window, meaning for heavy businesses, this is not the best bet, or this is not the best suit, that I cannot just go for a backup service, have, let's say, a 24-hour window basically between each and every backup. I do not have that leverage. Secondly, backups take time. At least I'm talking about, I do not have any data. It took somewhere around 1 hour plus, right? So it took about 1 hour 12 minutes for me. When I'm considering I don't have any data. Now imagine if the data volume is high, the data volume is heavy. This time can anywhere go up to, let's say, somewhere around 3 hours also. It can go that. I mean, I've seen backups going in that that direction also. So it takes time to take a backup. It also takes time to restore a backup. You would have done a virtual machine restoration. It would have also taken time to restore this particular backup service. But being a machine that is running in something known that is running in something known as a production, meaning there are a lot of people who are actually looking at my website. I don't have that time, or I don't really enjoy, let's say, the privilege of time to go for a downtime of about an hour, then restore my machine back again. I don't have that privilege, because if I do that, I lose millions of dollars. Because if, let's say, an e-commerce site is down for a minute, there's a big fuss in the market, the shares drop and all that stuff, right? So this is the major driving factor. This is the major revenue driving factor out here. Now, any case, like, when can a machine go down? Like, let's say the data center is going down, the region is going down. In any case, if something like this happens, I need a replica of my machine. I need a same copy of my machine with the same configuration in some other region to be automatically created, or not automatically, but let's say to be created immediately. I need this to be up and running, like, you know, at this point in time. That's it. And I want all the data that I have taken till this point. I don't need a data loss. This is what I want to try to replicate out. And I want this service to be faster. Now, in this case, going for a backup service is not advisable. Microsoft itself tells you that, okay, fine, if you're going to do something like this, then please don't use my backup service, because backups are for, let's say, like 24-hour period. Instead, go for another concept or go for another option that I have, which is called ASR, Azure Site Recovery, which is also in short called ASR. And normally, when you apply for a job role for something known as an IaaS engineer, like meaning infrastructure as a service engineer, this is one of the most asked concepts, because in most of the businesses, we use this concept, or we use basically this concept known as Azure Site Recovery, in order to make sure to achieve something known as a DR scenario, disaster recovery. This is there for a purpose known as disaster recovery. So let's see how do you enable this, what do you do, and etc. So let me go ahead, create a new virtual machine out here. So I'll just go ahead. I have a demo virtual machine out here, but let me go ahead and create a new virtual machine as such. Let's say I'll create a new resource group. So I'll say ASR resource group, or let's say test RG, and I'll say East US, and I'll say okay, fine. This is VM1. I'll just take, let's say, a region like East US. Sorry, take a region like East US, and I'll say give the username and password and etc. Just allow this port out, and let's go to the disks, networking, everything remains the same again. And management also, I'll just disable the boot diagnostics. I'll say review and create this out. So I'm just creating a very simple virtual machine. So whatever we did, I'm just like doing the same replication out here. So I'm just repeating the same steps out here. So I have opened up a couple of ports, and I've created this machine again. While the machine is getting created, just a quick recap of how basically the VM architecture goes around is that the very first thing that gets created are these two resources known as the network security group rules and the public IP address. Third, virtual network subnet. Fourth, the NIC card and your private IP that is coming from the subnet, and the public IP that is coming from, let's say, the public IP resource. Both are assigned to this particular entity or to this particular resource known as NIC card. So both are assigned to the NIC card out here. And finally, the NIC card is attached to the virtual machine service. And also the data disks and everything get attached to the virtual machine service out here. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing this on so much is because when we are doing automation using PowerShell scripts or ARM templates or Terraform, we need to understand the order in which they're created, and we need to create them accordingly. So that's the reason I'm just emphasizing on this again and again, so that while we do automation, it's going to be a bit easy for us to understand what is the flow or what is the workflow basically that we are following and etc. Okay, so let's go back and let's give it a minute, and the service is ready. Now, as in when you create, let's say, the virtual machine service, a lot of people might kind of look at this particular banner telling that the agent is not ready, please troubleshoot, and etc. This is a very common, let's say, message that Microsoft rolls out to a lot of things out there. When they say the agent, they say the virtual machine agent, right? It's nothing but the backend server. So this virtual machine is actually running from a physical server, right? So this is telling that okay, fine, the physical server it's still being allocated. So please give us some time and etc. But this is the default message what they do. But this should basically go away in like about 2 or 3 minutes or so. After that, you shouldn't be able to see that. Okay. Now, yesterday again, what did we do? Is that we went into something known as a backup service. We said okay, fine, I want a backup, and I said okay, fine, let me go ahead and take this backup out here. And I clicked on the backup, and it was asking for details like what is your recovery services vault, what is your policy, how do you want to meet, how do you want me to create it, and etc. Do you want to change your policy, edit this, and etc. And I said that okay, fine, this is good but not great because now my business scenario has changed. We want something like this, that there should be someone or something basically, or there should be some sort of a mechanism using which I can create or I can stand up my entire I can stand up my entire application right up again with minimum data loss or with minimum amount of data loss is what I'm really looking at. For that particular service, I won't go for a backup. I will go for something known as disaster recovery. You have in under operations, you have something known as a disaster recovery, and the same thing is also known as Azure site recovery. So ASR or disaster recovery, it's one and the same. So once I hit this disaster recovery, now there will be a diagram which is asking me, okay, fine, you know what? You have created the virtual machine in East US 2. Now this is the region or this is the data center where I have provisioned the virtual machine for you. Now this entire thing is East US. This entire coastline is East US. And there are so many data centers out here. And Microsoft has allocated one particular data center to me, telling that okay, fine, I have allocated this to you in this particular data center, meaning your virtual machine is running from here right now. So your virtual machine is situated in region, and and it says, okay, fine, you know what? Now I understand you want to do a disaster recovery. Can you give me a secondary region just in case if let's say your machine fails or just in case your machine goes down, I will fail over to a secondary region. Meaning fail over is like falling on a secondary region. That if your primary region isn't working or if your primary machine isn't working, then please go ahead and select the secondary region. In this case, the purple dot represents the secondary region out here, and you as a user can now select what your secondary region is. For example, let's say I don't basically want it to be West US 2. I rather want it to be something like North Europe. So I'll say, okay, fine, you know what? This is not West US, and I can just select from the available regions out here, and I can say North Europe, and automatically you see the region or the replication is now shifting out. Or let's say it's telling, okay, fine, I will create or I will select the primary data center as East US 2, and I'll select the data center as North Europe, which is like thousands of miles apart from, let's say, your primary data center. I'll say, okay, great. And I'll say, next, advanced settings. Now, this is important. Now, I am doing two things out here. I am, I know what my source region is. I know what my source machine is. Now, I am creating a target region, or I want to stand up something known as a target region out here. So, Microsoft is asking me two things out here, that what is your source, what is your destination, or what is the target. Now it's telling me, okay, great. The subscription of the source virtual machine is a free trial. Do you also want the target virtual machine to be in the same subscription? You can select different subscription as well. There is no restriction out here. You can select a different subscription, but in my case, I only have one subscription under this tenant. So I'm selecting the target subscription is also the same thing. Secondly, it's asking me, you know what, there is something known as test RGUSEs too. or this is the source resource group. Are you okay if I go ahead and create this resource group in the target, which is test rg east-us hyphen asr Azure Site Recovery? If you don't want that to happen, you can just go ahead and, let's say, select the existing resource groups, or you can create a new resource group and select that out here. Okay, anything's okay. For now, I'll say, okay, fine, please create a new resource group with the name called test rg east-us2 hyphen asr. This is the resource group that I want you to go ahead and create this out. Secondly, I'll say, for creating a virtual machine, one of the important component is a virtual network and a subnet inside it, right? So I have one in the source. Now I'm telling, okay, fine, this is my source VNet name. My target is in North Europe. Please go ahead and create something called test US VNet hyphen ASR. So I'm telling it, in the target region, I also want a virtual network like this. But if you already have a virtual network in the target, you can select that. Okay, so the virtual network and the subnet are sorted out here. Then comes into place something known as availability and proximity placement groups. Availability, we haven't covered it, so I'm not taking it at this point. So for now, I have selected something known as a single instance in the source region. So I'm selecting the same thing in the target region as well. So these are the two things that we'll come back and cover it. Like tomorrow is the class when we're going to cover these things, availability and all that stuff. After this, it says I need a storage account. Now, what is this storage account used for? Is that it says a new cache storage account will be created and your disk will be replicated, meaning you have the virtual machine here, and I'm talking about this is a source region. So I'm saying this is a source. I'm saying this is east US. In this target region or in the source region, I have a disk. Okay, so I have a virtual machine disk out here, which is acting like my C drive. I can have multiple disks also. So here I just have one disk which is acting as a C drive out here. Now the data inside this particular virtual machine is residing in this disk. In whatever disk it is, it's residing in it. I want this data to be continuously copied. Okay, I want it to be continuously copied so that it's not like 24 hours right now. I want it to be copied for every minute or probably every second or probably every 10 seconds or something like that. I want this to be copied, but I need some destination to be copied, right? This is where I'm getting something known as a storage account out here. So I'm saying I'll use something known as a cache storage account out here in order to continuously copy this data into this particular storage account so that I don't affect the machine. So I'm not affecting the machine. The machine is running. It's great. I'm not even disturbing it. And in the source region, I'm now creating something known as a cache storage account and replicating or copying all the data directly into this particular storage account out here inside the containers of the storage account so that the data can stay there or the data is not, let's say, is not lost. Okay. So I'm saying, okay, fine. This is the cache storage account that I want to go for. And also, I need to create something known as the destination disk, right? In this destination region, in the target region, I also want a disk. So it's asking me, okay, fine, this is the details of the storage account. Great. Can you also please go ahead and give me the details of the destination or the replica disk that you want to go ahead and create? So I am creating a couple of resources out here. To begin with, I have a source resource group, and now I am saying that I also need something known as a target resource group in the target region. In my case, the target region is North Europe. So let's write that down. And in the target region, I am making sure to create the virtual network. And I'm also making sure to create the disk to make sure that this is ready. So a couple of resources like the virtual networks and like the disk and etc. Finally, it's asking me, okay, fine, you know what? In order to replicate things out, I will need someone or something known as a vault. Very importantly, it's telling, okay, fine, I need something known as a recovery services vault out here. I need to make sure to use something like a recovery services vault. And the vault is sitting in a region called as North Europe. The vault is in the secondary region. It's not in the primary region. It's in the secondary region. So let me bring in the vault here. So I also want to go ahead and create a vault out here, which holds all the replication data or all the replicated data out here. And it says that the replication policy is a 24-hour policy, meaning it retains it and basically it does a replication for every 24 hours. The vault, I'm talking just about the vault. So it retains for every 24 hours and let's say creates multiple copies of my virtual machine or multiple copies of the backup data inside the vault so that it is protected. Now, finally, I have everything that I need right now. So this is the source. Everything that you see in the right hand side of my screen is the destination, wherein I am now telling Microsoft to go ahead and create a virtual network, a recovery services vault, and a disk. So these are the three resources that I'm telling Microsoft to go ahead and provision it out. I am nowhere mentioning what is the name of the virtual machine. I'm nowhere talking about the virtual machine, etc. Because the virtual machine will be created when you actually fail over. When you basically have a disaster, you want to fail over, that's when the virtual machine will be created and the disks and everything will be attached to the virtual machine, because virtual machine as such doesn't hold the data. The disk of the virtual machine holds the data. So that's the reason I'm creating the disk, replicating things out and etc. Finally, I need someone to manage all these process. I cannot come here, I cannot click on replicate for every second. I cannot do that. I need someone or something to automate the entire thing out here for me, to make sure that this is all handled, and this is all handled in a brilliant way. That's where something called as an automation account comes into picture. Now again, we'll look into the automation account, we'll understand what an automation account normally is. But normally what happens in an automation account is that you can write PowerShell scripts and you can schedule it. This will work as a backend job. So Microsoft, what it's doing is that it's giving you an automation account that does a backend job of constantly copying the data from the source from the source disk to the source storage account, and making sure that this data is replicated across region into the target disk. The reason I'm taking a cache storage account out here is that I don't want to disturb my virtual machine service. So whatever is the state of the data, I just want to capture it into the cache storage account, and I want to constantly basically replicate this out to the destination region. So that's where the automation account is playing an important role. So the automation account is, let's say, the centerpiece of all this puzzle, which helps you to do a replication constantly. Meaning from here the data is copied here, and from here the data is being stored inside this particular storage account, and it's being replicated constantly to the secondary region. So this is the entire infrastructure, and it's really complex. It's really complex to understand, and it really basically is a bit, tricky to basically do this. So that's the reason Microsoft is managing all this for you. It says, okay, fine, this is all my services. And if you look at this, something known as an extension setting, it says site recovery manages site recovery extensions, updates, and etc. So if I click click on this, it says, okay, fine, you know what? There is something known as an automation account that I want to create. that I want to create. Sorry, there is something known as an automation account that I want to create. So can you please say what is the name of the automation account? So I say, okay, fine, this is the automation account and etc. And I say review and start replication. So now it says, okay, fine, these are all the source and this is all the destination resources that I'll go ahead and create right now. So all these are the source and everything else is the target. And finally it says, okay, fine, there are also something something like the cache storage account in the source region, the disk in the source region and let's say the disk in the target region also. So I'm replicating things out, and I'm also creating something known as the site recovery vault, or sorry, the recovery services vault. And finally, I'm creating something known as the automation account so that it can be handled and etc. And I will say start replication. Now it says I'm creating the target resources, and it is now saying I'm initializing the deployment. It's now initially creating the virtual network, the disk, automation account, recovery services vault, cache storage account, and etc. And after it is created, now this will take about 20 minutes. The initial replication, meaning once you click on start, this will now start taking about 20 minutes out here. So once I hit the start button, so it says submitting deployment, I'll say okay, not a problem. This will now start taking somewhere around 20 minutes out here. And it says okay, fine, there is Microsoft recovery services that I've like let's say created and everything. And it's starting to create, let's say, a couple of resources like the disk, like the virtual machine, like the virtual network and etc. And once you finally create it, once after 20 minutes, now what I did is that since we do not have to wait for 20 minutes in the class, I went ahead and created the same setup, but I named my resource group as demo RG. So I ended up creating something known as a demo RG ASR, and I have something known as a site recovery vault RG. My source region when I started was in East US 2. My target region was in North Europe. So my source and the target was like in this way. So let me go into, let's say, the source account. So this is what you will see after the replication is enabled. In your case, once you hit create replication, these are all the resource groups that you'll see after the replication is enabled, minus these two, because these two is something that I just created for this particular demo. I just created these things, these two things. So please ignore this out and let's focus upon this. So in here, I have the source virtual network, the source virtual machine which is running, which has, let's say, the e-commerce website that this particular website is hosting out. Then you have the public IP, then you have the NSG, NIC card, the virtual machine disk and everything. Now in the target region, it ended up creating a couple of resources. It said, okay, fine, I will just go ahead and create something known as a virtual network so that just in case when you replicate things out, I'll know basically that I can use this particular virtual network out here. Finally, you have something known as a site recovery vault RG. So I'll just go inside this out. And there are a couple of things out here. Firstly, I have something known as the cache storage account. I very importantly have something known as the the automation account out here. Now, the reason that you're seeing two automations account out here is because I just enabled the other application for our demo today. But in your case, you should see one storage account, one automation account, and one vault in the destination region. And let's say if I go into the automation account, for example, let's say I think I created this out. So let's go into this one. Okay, it says zero jobs. Let's come back. Okay, it's for some reason it's taking some time. So in here, when you once you go inside the automation account and once the replication is enabled, you should see that there is one job out here that is running. It should say, okay, fine. It will say basically that, you know what, this is a backend job basically that I do have, and I am handling things in the backend. Now it says there is no job found. The reason being it's just created, or let's go back, or it's some for some reason this is not getting refreshed. So in your case, when you enable this out, you should see one job that is running in the backend, which is helping you manage all these replications out there, which is helping you do all the replication and everything. And finally, you have the vault out here. And yesterday, we looked into something known as backup items because this is what was helping us to back up things around and etc. But today, I'll go in and look in something known as a replicated items. So it would say, basically it'll take some time, to get the data and etc. And it will basically tell you that there is some replication out here. Finally, after this is done, let me go back into the resource group. And let me go into the virtual machine service. So this is my target, or sorry, this is my source, and I'll just say disaster recovery. Okay, so for some reason it wasn't created, meaning I had started the replication, but for some reason this replication did not go through, meaning it failed in between. So I'll have to again, start the replication out here again. Again, this is going to take somewhere around 20 minutes, guys. So just give me 1 second. Let me see what this replication is, the operation is on right now. So right now I am enabling the replication to the virtual machine that we just created. So right now this is the virtual machine that I created in the East US 2 region, and this is getting replicated right now. Now, as I said, this replication will take about 20 minutes. It'll take about at least 20 minutes out here. And once this replication is done, once this is done, once this job is done, just go into the resource group and just go into the virtual machine service. So this is the resource group that I had, and I can just go into the virtual machine service. And once the replication is done, okay, if you go into something known as a disaster recovery, you won't see this page anymore. Rather, you will see something known as failover and test failover. These are the two options that you'll have here. Once this is done, like it'll take about 20 minutes to basically to enable the replication and etc. And what I want you all to try is just go ahead and hit the test failover button here. Just go ahead, hit the test failover button, and see what are all the resources that are getting created after you hit the failover button. And also make sure that this job is getting completed. In my case, for some reason the job did not get completed, so I'll have to check or see basically, or I do not remember if I've enabled this replication yesterday. So I do not remember hitting the enable replication button out here yesterday. But this is all basically that runs in the background. That it tells you that okay, fine, I'm running this in the background and etc. And for the first time, for the very first time, this is going to take somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes. So once you give that time and then come back, please go into, let's say, this particular option called test failover. Go into disaster recovery, and you will see a different screen telling do a test failover and etc. Once you hit the test failover, that is when your virtual machine will be created with all the latest data, meaning this replication will happen for every 1 minute or every 50 seconds, depending upon, let's say, the job what Microsoft does. So this is a managed job, but Microsoft makes sure that it is less than 2 minutes. The recovery points are less than 2 minutes. So that's how the data will be replicated constantly, stored inside the storage account. Then basically it will be snapshotted into the destination disk, and that disk will be finally attached to the virtual machine when you perform a failover. Until then, your virtual machine service isn't created at all. So this makes sure that your cost is less. Meaning, even if you're replicating things out, you're not actually creating a virtual machine service. You're making sure to create a virtual machine service only during the time when you want it. And the time for creation of just a virtual machine service with a NIC card, without, let's say, all these things, will take about 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes basically at the max. So once that's done, your application is up and running. So instead of waiting for about an hour or so for the backup service, this service alternatively can be used for something known as a disaster recovery only. For a disaster recovery scenario wherein you're saying that okay, fine, your primary data center is actually going down, then how can I get my secondary data center up? How can I use the secondary data center service as such? Okay, any questions that I can take here, guys? Yes, yes, it can happen parallel. If you have multiple disks, all those disks will be replicated. All those disks, yes. No, only one storage account, but all the data of the disk will be partitioned inside the container, and it will be basically put into, let's say, the other the other location.
Hello, sir.
No, you will have to do that. You will have to manually assign your domain name and etc. You will have to do that manually. Yes, someone online had a question. Sorry.
Sir, yes.
Yep.
Hello.
Please go ahead.
Sir, if I'm creating the original resource group, if I was deleted, suppose unfortunately, so what
Mhm.
happens to targeted resource group? The condition of targeted.
So what happens to a target resource group if the original resource group gets deleted? For example, let's say this is my source resource group and I am deleting this out. Okay. I am deleting the source resource group out. So what's going to happen is that you will still have the recovery services vault. The recovery services vault is completely sitting in a different resource group as such. So if you look at the resource groups out here, the recovery services vault will now be created in another resource group known as site recovery RG. And this won't get deleted at any cost. This won't get deleted because again, if you want to delete the recovery services vault and etc., you'll have to disable the security and etc. So it should be a deliberate deleting. It should be a deliberate deletion. So if, let's say the source is deleted, you can still go ahead and bring back the destination.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions here, guys? Any more questions? Anyway? Mhm. Yes. Yes. That's right. So I've talked about automation in case you're not going for the service called Azure Site Recovery. In case you want to go for something like a snapshot, which doesn't have a schedule, that's when you will have to do that work of writing a PowerShell script and automating it out. Because these services are not that cheap. These are costly. Let's say if you're a startup company, you're okay. Meaning you're not writing data aggressively, let's say into your disks. You're writing you're still okay to go ahead and take snapshots for about 12 hours or 24 hours and etc. Now you'd like to do the automation. You'd like to write your scripts and automate it out using, let's say, the automation account or a DevOps pipeline, like however you want to do it. You can automate things out on your own. If you are managing it right, the entire responsibility is on you to make sure to patch things out, to make sure to update things out, and etc. But in this case, you're leaving that option with Microsoft, telling that, okay, fine, you know what, I'm okay to go ahead and give you that particular privilege. You can go ahead and enable my replication and all that stuff. Any more questions here, guys?
Sir, what are the resources are created resource group backup
In the
resource?
destination,
Yeah, target. Yeah.
so the resources that will get created after the replication is enabled in the destination is that you will have a destination virtual network and you will have a disk. Now see, you are getting a disk out here because I am doing a replication at this point. It's telling enabling replication out here, and you will get this particular resource, which is a virtual network, a subnet inside it, and you will have a disk basically that got created in, let's say, in a resource group known as a site recovery RG. You got a, let's coming back to that. So you got something known as the cache storage account. So you have a cache storage account, you have an automation account, and you have a recovery services vault. These are a couple of things that got created. So I'm looking at 5 to 6 resources that got created, and I'm still not saying that the virtual machine got created right now, because for the virtual machine to be created, the replication process should be done, and you need to have something known as failover or test failover. So don't create a failover because you'll again have to delete all those resources manually. Do a test failover so that after the test, you have an option known as clean up the target resources. You can just click on clean up. You'll just say, okay, fine, I have cleaned up the resource and etc. And now you see it says enable the replication for VM1 that got successful. So as I said, it took about 15 minutes to do the entire procedure. If you look at this time out here, so it took about all these things. It did in the backend. It did a lot of things in the backend. It said, okay, fine, I've created all these things out here and etc. And sorry, someone had a question on the target resources. So is that clear? Was I able to answer that? Someone online had the question on what are the target resources. So is that clear? Okay. So if I now go into the virtual machine one, and if I now say disaster recovery, this is what I'll see is that after my disaster recovery, all these options, right, called failover, test failover, cleanup failover, all these things will be enabled once the synchronization is done. Right now, it says it's a 0% synchronization. It will take some time in order to go to 100%, and you will get something known as a recovery point, RPO, and it will tell you that the latest recovery point is just like 1 second or 2 seconds, something like that. And once this is done, you can just go ahead and do a test failover out here. And as and when you do a test failover, the most important thing that gets created out here is the VM basically, because you have everything for your VM to be created right now. If I, let's say, go into the resource groups back, if I go into the resource groups out here, and if I, let's say, go into the destination, which is in North Europe, I have the virtual network and I have the disk out here. The only thing that needs to be created is, let's say, the public IP address, the NIC card, and the virtual machine, which will take less than 2 minutes of time, because when you're creating all the resources itself, when you're creating a new virtual machine, it's taking you somewhere around 3 minutes of time. If you're just creating a virtual machine service and a NIC card, it will be very quick. And this data is already being replicated, this is constantly being replicated, right? This disk will just be attached to the virtual machine and your application will be up and running in that way. So what I want you all to do out here is that after you enable replication, please see firstly what are the resources that are getting created, what are all the resources that it ended up creating. Secondly, please come into, let's say, the source out here, go into the virtual machine and try to do a test failover. So how do you do that? Again, I'm in the virtual machine service, and once I'll say disaster recovery out here, once the synchronization is done, now the synchronization should be done out here, and once this is done, you will have options like the failover, like the test failover, and then after the test failover is done, you can clean up the failover. Okay, you can clean up, meaning you'll just go ahead and delete the virtual machine, the NIC card associated with it. You'll just clean up all these resources out here. Now, this process is known as a disaster recovery or an ASR, Azure Site Recovery, or it's also known as continuous replication CR, because this data is being continuously replicated across region and we're doing a lot of stuff out here. So this process entirely is known as the continuous replication ASR or disaster recovery out here. And most of the companies do utilize this because this is a perfect DR situation that you are doing a disaster recovery out here. And this coming down, if you want to see or if you want to understand what are the resources that are created in the source and the target, this diagram will help you understand that what is happening in the backend. So it says in the source, I have, let's say, the virtual machine, I have, let's say, the cache storage account, and in the destination, I have something known as the Azure Site Recovery Service, a virtual network in the backend, and I have a managed disk. And I'm copying all these data basically. I'm copying all these things out here. Okay. Any questions still here, guys? Sorry, I didn't get your question. Yes. So again, in real time, let's say, do we use the data center image as such? It depends upon what you exactly want to achieve. Let's say if you want to convert your server into a web server, and if you want a Windows operating system, you'll go for a data center service. And the latest available is 2019. You had a 2016 also, 2012 also, but no one is using 2012 these days. It's either 16 or 19 basically people are going for. Let's say if you want to go, if you don't want to say, okay, fine, I don't want this, I don't want a Windows operating system, my use case scenario is different, I want to do something else, you can also go for a Linux. For example, let's say Docker and etc., you'll go for Linux operating systems out here. So it completely depends upon what do you really want to achieve, or what is the end goal out there, so that you can go for different services. And finally, if you want to delete all these resources, guys, now the source can be deleted right away. Like there's no issue with deleting the source. But if you look at the site recovery RG, this is important. You'll again have to do the same deletion process out here. So you'll have to go into the site recovery vault, disable the protection. So I should go into the security settings out here. So let me go into the properties and let me go into something known as security settings. So right now it is enabled. I'll have to disable these both. Save this out. And once this is saved, I'll have to go. Yesterday I went into backup items. Today I'll go into the replicated items. And I have one particular machine that's being replicated right now. I'll have to say disable the replication. And then I'll say, okay, fine, I'm doing a POC or I'm testing it out and etc. So Microsoft will just ask you this reason and you can say okay. And the replication will be removed. It will be disabled and removed out. And then you can go ahead and delete your resource group. So this is what you need to do if you want to delete all the resources and etc. Okay. Any more questions here, guys? So the assignment for you all, or what you all want to try out, is try performing a test failover. And after performing a test failover, now this synchronization will take some time. After synchronization is done, do a test failover. Then after the test failover is done, see whether what are the resources that are getting created, how your application is getting created. Then finally clean up the test resources. Like clean up all the failover. Then go into your recovery services vault, disable the security settings, disable the replication, and then start deleting all your resources. So it says remove the replication items. Now is the time where I can go ahead and say, okay, fine, I'm like done with all these things out. I can now start deleting all these things. So this is the main thing, which basically I'll start deleting firstly, and then I'll target all the resources out here. Okay. This is what I would do when I want to delete all my resources. Okay. So any further questions here, guys? Any more questions here? Okay, if there are no more questions, then we can go to close the session for today. And let's start from tomorrow a concept known as high availability. That how do you design an application for being highly available? What are the concepts for that? We'll look into that. And then we'll go into something known as PaaS services. Like we basically need to look at what are Azure app services, Azure, let's say, app service plans and Azure web apps and etc. Then we have something known as key vaults, SQL servers, and then we'll move into DevOps. Okay, guys, thank you.